Well, as we sit here in August of 21, just entering August, a lot of people have asked, what inning are we in a baseball game for an analogy? And I don't think we are. I think we're in batting practice. I think, stretching or batting practice. I don't think the real game starts until the real customers show up. And here again, our customers are nuclear utilities. They're the end users of the product. And quite frankly, they've been very inactive. There have been some RFPs issued that are looking at deliveries in late 23 and then really ramping up in 24 and the out years, which coincides with our belief in when the real pension supply will come. This game tends to be a lot, at least in my view, a lot longer lived than the last cycle. The last cycle was supply driven. That is, there were a perfect storm of supply interruptions with MacArthur River flooding, Ranger flooding in Australia, which at the time was one of the top 10 mines in the world. Rossing in Namibia having incredible labor problems due to the AIDS epidemic at the time. And, that curtailment of supply, the difficulties of bringing Cigar Lake into production, all culminated in a perfect storm, but it was on the supply side. Wasn't any significant increase in demand. Conversely, this time, a number of things have changed. This will be a demand-driven cycle, I believe. The demand is increasing. Many of the reactors in the US are being relicensed at higher power output ratings, which means they'll be consuming more fuel. There are a few places that they're still closing down plants, but I think what we're seeing is the tail end of that anti-nuclear movement crossing paths with the rebirth of the green energy phenomenon and the realization that, if you aren't going to use fossil fuels, you can't rely on solar and wind. Simple fact of the matter is the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day, except maybe at either pole at the appropriate time of year. And the wind doesn't blow all the time unless you're in Wyoming. But I think the key is this is a crosswinds. We're seeing the tail end of the anti-nuke period crossing with the revitalization. So while a few places are closing them down, there are far more places building new ones. China obviously is the leader in this. Russia's aggressively building them as well. A number of countries in the Mideast are adding to them. A number of countries that talked about curtailing are actually continuing and extending the lives of their plants. And in addition, I'd mentioned the upsizing or increase of power outages of the US or outputs of the US plants. They're also extending the licenses of them for decades beyond their original planned lifespan. And here again, that's due to the incredibly good safety operational record of them, and the fact the engineering on it was so good that these plants are able to extend their life span much beyond the original plans. So I think we've got a good decade ahead of us, unlike a year or two or three blip. I think the market has maybe shown a lot of excitement that wasn't there last time, because investors by and large are far more educated about uranium and the fuel cycle this time than they were last. Last time it had been a good probably 20, 30 years since a real serious uranium boom. So we've still got a significant number of people that are involved in the investment arena that remember the 04 to 08 or were involved in it. And as I say, the sophistication level, far greater this time around. So the pool of investors is far greater. It's in addition, we've got the advent of the ETF funds in uranium, which were not present last time. Huge driver of prices. Also, they create their own investor interest in the public sector, and not requiring the individual investor to have the expertise to be involved in picking individual names. And we've also got social media, which has been a huge new impact. So while we've got roughly the same number of companies we had at the early stages in the last uranium cycle, and certainly the same number of credible potential producers, which is very small, we have a much larger and much more sophisticated investor pool with far greater capital. So I think that's what you've seen in the market over the last couple of years. More recently in the last year, with some of the producers actually buying uranium, speculating on the price, or in our case, buying uranium to ensure contract deliveries once those contracts start in the next year or two. And then you've got the Sprott Physical Trust that just announced. So these are all wild cards that may exacerbate or accelerate the uranium price and the shortage of uranium that's coming. So stay tuned. The game hasn't started yet, but I think everyone that's in the market now has got a great seat for the coming game.